motion. That the idea was not novel, and had been already much used. That it would be infinitely better for the plates to arise naturally out of the text, and that I would like to take my own way with a freer range of English scenes and people, and was afraid I should ultimately do so in any case, whatever course I might prescribe to myself at starting. My views being deferred to, I thought of Mr. Pickwick, and wrote the first number, from the proof sheets of which Mr. Seymour made his drawings of the club, and his happy portrait of its founder, the latter on Mr. Edward Chapman's description of the dress and bearing of a real personage whom he had often seen. I connected Mr. Pickwick with a club, because of the original suggestion, and I put in Mr. Winkle expressly for the use of Mr. Seymour. We started with a number of 24 pages instead of 32, and 4 illustrations in lieu of a couple. Mr. Seymour's sudden and lamented death before the second number was published brought about a quick decision upon a point already in agitation. The number became one of 32 pages, with only 2 illustrations, and remained so to the end. It is with great unwillingness that I notice some intangible and incoherent assertions which have been made professly on behalf of Mr. Seymour to the effect that he had some share in the invention of this book, or of anything in it not faithfully described in the foregoing paragraph. With the moderation that is due equally to my respect for the memory of a brother artist and to my self-respect, I confine myself to placing on record here the facts. That Mr. Seymour never originated or suggested an incident, a phrase, or a word to be found in this book. That Mr. Seymour died when only 24 pages of this book were published, and when assuredly not 48 were written. That I believe I never saw Mr. Seymour's handwriting in my life. That I never saw Mr. Seymour but once in my life, and that was on the night but one before his death, when he certainly offered no suggestion whatsoever. That I saw him then in the presence of 2 persons, both living, perfectly acquainted with all these facts, and whose written testimony to them I possess. Lastly, that Mr. Edward Chapman, the survivor of the original firm of Chapman and Hall, has set down in writing, for similar preservation, his personal knowledge of the origin and progress of this book, of the monstrosity of the baseless assertions in question, and, tested by details, even of the self-evident impossibility of there being any truth in them. In the exercise of the forbearance on which I have resolved, I do not quote Mr. Edward Chapman's account of his deceased partner's reception on a certain occasion of the pretences in question. Boz, my signature in the Morning Chronicle, and in the old monthly magazine, appended to the monthly cover of this book, and retained long afterwards, was the nickname of a pet child, a younger brother, whom I had dubbed Moses, in honour of the vicar of Wakefield, which, being facetiously pronounced through the nose, became Bozes, and being shortened became Boz. Boz was a very familiar household word to me, long before I was an author, and so I came to adopt it. It has been observed of Mr. Pickwick that there is a decided change in his character as these pages proceed, and that he becomes more good and more sensible. I do not think this change will appear forced or unnatural to my readers, if they will reflect that in real life the peculiarities and oddities of a man who has anything whimsical about him generally impress us first, and that it is not until we are better acquainted with him that we usually begin to look below these superficial traits and to know the better part of him. Lest there should be any well-intentioned persons who do not perceive the difference, as some such could not when Old Mortality was newly published, between religion and the cant of religion, piety and the pretence of piety, a humble reverence for the great truths of Scripture, and an audacious and offensive obtrusion of its letter and not its spirit in the commonest dissensions and meanest affairs of life,